To the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway Inc., our gain in net worth during 2000 was $3.96 billion, which increased the per-share book value of both our Class A and Class B stock by 6.5%. Over the last 36 years, that is, since present management took over, per-share book value has grown from $19 to $40,442, a gain of 23.6% compounded annually. Overall, we had a decent year, our book value gain having outpaced the performance of the S&P 500, and though this judgment is necessarily subjective, we believe Berkshire's gain in per-share intrinsic value moderately exceeded its gain in book value. Intrinsic value, as well as other key investment and accounting terms and concepts, are explained in our owner's manual on pages 59-66. Intrinsic value is discussed on page 64. Furthermore, we completed two significant acquisitions that we negotiated in 1999 and initiated 6 more. All told, these purchases have cost us about $8 billion, with 9.5% of that amount paid in cash and 3% in stock. The 8 businesses we've acquired have aggregate sales of about $13 billion and employ 58,000 people. Still, we incurred no debt in making these purchases, and our shares outstanding have increased only 1/3%. Better yet, we remain awash in liquid assets and are both eager and ready for even larger acquisitions. I will detail our purchases in the next section of the report. But I will tell you, now that we have embraced the 21st century by entering such cutting-edge industries as brick, carpet, insulation, and paint, try to control your excitement. On the minus side, policyholder growth at Geico slowed to a halt as the year progressed. It has become much more expensive to obtain new business. I told you last year that we would get our money's worth from stepped-up advertising at Geico in 2000, but I was wrong. We'll examine the reasons later in the report. Another negative, which has persisted for several years, is that we see our equity portfolio as only mildly attractive. We own stocks of some excellent businesses, but most of our holdings are fully priced and are unlikely to deliver more than moderate returns in the future. We're not alone in facing this problem. The long-term prospect for equities in general is far from exciting. Finally, there is the negative that recurs annually. Charlie Munger, Berkshire's vice chairman and my partner, and I are a year older than when we last reported to you. Mitigating this adverse development is the indisputable fact that the age of your top managers is increasing at a considerably lower rate, percentage-wise, than is the case at almost all other major corporations. Better yet, this differential will widen in the future. Charlie and I continue to aim at increasing Berkshire's per-share value at a rate that, over time, will modestly exceed the gain from owning the S&P 500. As the table on the facing page shows, a small annual advantage in our favor can, if sustained, produce an anything but small long-term advantage. To reach our goal, we will need to add a few good businesses to Berkshire's stable each year. Have the businesses we own generally gain in value and avoid any material increase in our outstanding shares. We are confident about meeting the last two objectives. The first will require some luck. It's appropriate here to thank two groups that made my job both easy and fun last year, just as they do every year. First, our operating managers continue to run their businesses in splendid fashion, which allows me to spend my time allocating capital rather than supervising them. I wouldn't be good at that anyway. All figures used in this report apply to Berkshire's A shares, the successor to the only stock that the company had outstanding before 1996. The B shares have an economic interest equal to 1/30th that of the A. Our managers are a very special breed. At most large companies, the truly talented divisional managers seldom have the job they really want. Instead, they yearn to become CEOs, either at their present employer or elsewhere. Indeed, if they stay put, they and their colleagues are likely to feel they have failed. At Berkshire, our all-stars have exactly the jobs they want, ones that they hope and expect to keep throughout their business lifetimes. They therefore concentrate solely on maximizing the long-term value of the businesses that they own and love. If the businesses succeed, they have succeeded, and they stick with us. In our last 36 years, Berkshire has never had a manager of a significant subsidiary voluntarily leave to join another business. The other group to which I owe enormous thanks is the home office staff. After the 8 acquisitions, more than doubled our worldwide workforce to about 112,000. Charlie and I went soft last year and added one more person at headquarters. Charlie, bless him, never lets me forget Ben Franklin's advice. A small leak can sink a great ship. This tiny band works miracles. In 2000, it handled all of the details connected with our 8 acquisitions, processed extensive regulatory and tax filings. Our tax return covers 4,896 pages, smoothly produced an annual meeting to which 25,000 tickets were issued, and accurately dispensed checks to 3,660 charities designated by our shareholders. In addition, the group dealt with all the routine tasks served up by a company with a revenue run rate of $40 billion and more than 300,000 owners. And to add to all of this, the other 12.8 are a delight to be around. I should pay to have my job. Acquisitions of 2,000. Our acquisition technique at Berkshire is simplicity itself. We answer the phone. I'm also glad to report that it rings a bit more often now, because owners and/or managers increasingly wish to join their companies with Berkshire. Our acquisition criteria are set forth on page 23. Let me tell you a bit about the businesses we have purchased during the past 14 months, starting with the 2 transactions that were initiated in 1999 but closed in 2000. This list excludes some smaller purchases that were made by the managers of our subsidiaries, and that, in most cases, will be integrated into their operations. I described the first purchase 76% of Mid-American energy in last year's report. Because of regulatory constraints on our voting privileges, we perform only a one-line consolidation of Mid-Americans' earnings and equity in our financial statements. If we instead fully consolidated the company's figures, our revenues in 2000 would have been $5 billion greater than we reported, though net income would remain the same. On November 23, 1999, I received a one-page fax from Bruce Court that appended a Washington Post article describing an aborted buyout of Court Business Services. Despite his name, Bruce has no connection with Kjord. Rather, he is an airplane broker who had sold Berkshire a jet in 1986 and who, before the fax, had not been in touch with me for about 10 years. I knew nothing about Court, but I immediately printed out its SEC filings and liked what I saw. That same day, I told Bruce I had a possible interest and asked him to arrange a meeting with Paul Arnold, Court's CEO. Paul and I got together on November 29, and I knew at once that we had the right ingredients for a purchase. A fine, though unglamorous business, an outstanding manager, and a price, going by that on the failed deal, that made sense. Operating out of 117 showrooms, Court is the national leader in rent-to-rent furniture, primarily used in offices, but also by temporary occupants of apartments. This business, it should be noted, has no similarity to rent-to-own operations, which usually involve the sale of home furnishings and electronics to people having limited income and poor credit. We quickly purchased Court for Wesco, our 80% owned subsidiary, paying about $386 million in cash. You will find more details about Court's operations in Wesco's 1999 and 2000 annual reports. Both Charlie and I enjoy working with Paul, and Court looks like a good bet to beat our original expectations. Early last year, Ron Ferguson of General Re put me in contact with Bob Barry, whose family had owned U.S. Liability for 49 years. This insurer, along with two sister companies, is a medium-sized, highly respected writer of unusual risks, excess and surplus lines in insurance jargon. After Bob and I got in touch, we agreed by phone on a half-stock, half-cash deal. In recent years, Tom Nerney has managed the operation for the Barry family and has achieved a rare combination of excellent growth and unusual profitability. Tom is a powerhouse in other ways as well. In addition to having 4 adopted children, 2 from Russia, he has an extended family, the Philadelphia Bells, a young teen girls basketball team that Tom coaches. The team had a 62-4 record last year and finished second in the AAU National Tournament. Few property casualty companies are outstanding businesses. We have far more than our share, and U.S. Liability adds luster to the collection. Ben Bridge Jeweler was another purchase we made by phone prior to any face-to-face meeting between me and the management. Ed Bridge, who, with his cousin John, manages this 65-store West Coast retailer, is a friend of Barnett Hillsberg, from whom we bought Hillsberg Diamonds in 1995. Upon learning that the Bridge family proposed to sell its company, Barnett gave Berkshire a strong recommendation. Ed then called and explained his business to me, also sending some figures, and we made a deal. Again, half for cash and half for stock. Ed and John are fourth-generation owner-managers of a business started 89 years ago in Seattle. Both the business and the family, including Herb and Bob, the fathers of John and Ed, enjoy extraordinary reputations. Same-store sales have increased by 9%, 11%, 13%, 10%, 12%, 21%, and 7% over the past 7 years. A truly remarkable record. It was vital to the family that the company operate in the future as in the past. No one wanted another jewelry chain to come in and decimate the organization with ideas about synergy and cost saving, which, though they would never work, were certain to be tried. I told Ed and John that they would be in charge, and they knew I could be believed. After all, it's obvious that your chairman would be a disaster at actually running a store or selling jewelry, though there are members of his family who have earned black belts as purchasers. In their typically classy way, the Bridges allocated a substantial portion of the proceeds from their sale to the hundreds of co-workers who had helped the company achieve its success. We're proud to be associated with both the family and the company. In July, we acquired Justin Industries, the leading maker of Western boots, including the Justin, Tony Lama, Nocona, and Chippewa brands, and the premier producer of brick in Texas and 5 neighboring states. Here again, our acquisition involved serendipity. On May 4th, I received a fax from Mark Jones, a stranger to me, proposing that Berkshire join a group to acquire an unnamed company. I faxed him back, explaining that with rare exceptions, we don't invest with others, but would happily pay him a commission if he sent details, and we later made a purchase. He replied that the mystery company was Justin. I then went to Fort Worth to meet John Roach, chairman of the company, and John Justin, who had built the business and was its major shareholder. Soon after, we bought Justin for $570 million in cash. John Justin loved Justin Industries, but had been forced to retire because of severe health problems, which sadly led to his death in late February. John was a class act as a citizen, businessman, and human being. Fortunately, he had groomed 2 outstanding managers, Harold Melton at Acme and Randy Watson at Justin Boot, each of whom runs his company autonomously. Acme, the larger of the 2 operations, produces more than 1 billion bricks per year at its 22 plants, about 11.7% of the industry's national output. The brick business, however, is necessarily regional, and in its territory, Acme enjoys unquestioned leadership. When Texans are asked to name a brand of brick, 75% respond Acme, compared to 16% for the runner-up. Before our purchase, I couldn't have named a brand of brick. Could you have? This brand recognition is not only due to Acme's product quality, but also reflects many decades of extraordinary community service by both the company and John Justin. I can't resist pointing out that Berkshire, whose top management has long been mired in the 19th century, is now one of the very few authentic clicks and bricks businesses around. We went into 2000 with Geico doing significant business on the internet, and then we added Acme. You can bet this move by Berkshire is making them sweat in Silicon Valley. In June, Bob Shaw, CEO of Shaw Industries, the world's largest carpet manufacturer, came to see me with his partner, Julian Saul, and the CEO of a second company with which Shaw was mulling a merger. The potential partner, however, faced huge asbestos liabilities from past activities, and any deal depended on these being eliminated through insurance. The executives visiting me wanted Berkshire to provide a policy that would pay all future asbestos costs. I explained that though we could write an exceptionally large policy, far larger than any other insurer would ever think of offering, we would never issue a policy that lacked a cap. Bob and Julian decided that if we didn't want to bet the ranch on the extent of the acquiree's liability, neither did they. So their deal died, but my interest in Shaw was sparked, and a few months later, Charlie and I met with Bob to work out a purchase by Berkshire. A key feature of the deal was that both Bob and Julian were to continue owning at least 5% of Shaw. This leaves us associated with the best in the business, as shown by Bob and Julian's record. Each built a large, successful carpet business before joining forces in 1998. Shaw has annual sales of about $4 billion, and we own 87.3% of the company. Leaving aside our insurance operation, Shaw is by far our largest business. Now, if people walk all over us, we won't mind. In July, Bob Mundheim, a director of Benjamin Moore Paint, called to ask if Berkshire might be interested in acquiring it. I knew Bob from Salomon, where he was general counsel during some difficult times, and held him in very high regard. So my answer was, tell me more. In late August, Charlie and I met with Richard Rube and Yvonne Dupuis, past and present CEOs of Benjamin Moore. We liked them, we liked the business, and we made a $1 billion cash offer on the spot. In October, their board approved the transaction, and we completed it in December. Benjamin Moore has been making paint for 117 years and has thousands of independent dealers that are a vital asset to its business. Make sure you specify our product for your next paint job. Finally, in late December, we agreed to buy Johns Manville Corp. for about $1.8 billion. This company's incredible odyssey over the last few decades, too multifaceted to be chronicled here, was shaped by its long history as a manufacturer of asbestos products. The much publicized health problems that affected many people exposed to asbestos led to JM's declaring bankruptcy in 1982. Subsequently, the bankruptcy court established a trust for victims, the major asset of which was a controlling interest in JM. The trust, which sensibly wanted to diversify its assets, agreed last June to sell the business to an LBO buyer. In the end, though, the LBO group was unable to obtain financing. Consequently, the deal was called off on Friday, December 8th. The following Monday, Charlie and I called Bob Felice, chairman of the trust, and made an all-cash offer with no financing contingencies. The next day, the trustees voted tentatively to accept our offer, and a week later, we signed a contract. JM is the nation's leading producer of commercial and industrial insulation and also has major positions in roofing systems and a variety of engineered products. The company's sales exceed $2 billion, and the business has earned good, if cyclical, returns. Jerry Henry, JM's CEO, had announced his retirement plans a year ago, but I'm happy to report that Charlie and I have convinced him to stick around. Two economic factors probably contributed to the rush of acquisition activity we experienced last year. First, many managers and owners foresaw near-term slowdowns in their businesses, and in fact, we purchased several companies whose earnings will almost certainly decline this year from peaks they reached in 1999 or 2000. The declines make no difference to us, given that we expect all of our businesses to now and then have ups and downs. Only in the sales presentations of investment banks do earnings move forever upward. We don't care about the bumps. What matters are the overall results. But the decisions of other people are sometimes affected by the near-term outlook, which can both spur sellers and temper the enthusiasm of purchasers who might otherwise compete with us. A second factor that helped us in 2000 was that the market for junk bonds dried up as the year progressed. In the two preceding years, junk bond purchasers had relaxed their standards, buying the obligations of ever weaker issuers at inappropriate prices. The effects of this laxity were felt last year in a ballooning of defaults. In this environment, financial buyers of businesses, those who wished to buy using only a sliver of equity, became unable to borrow all they thought they needed. What they could still borrow, moreover, came at a high price. Consequently, LBO operators became less aggressive in their bidding when businesses came up for sale last year. Because we analyzed purchases on an all-equity basis, our evaluations did not change, which means we became considerably more competitive. Aside from the economic factors that benefited us, we now enjoy a major and growing advantage in making acquisitions in that we are often the buyer of choice for the seller. That fact, of course, doesn't assure a deal. Sellers have to like our price, and we have to like their business and management, but it does help. We find it meaningful when an owner cares about whom he sells to. We like to do business with someone who loves his business and his customers, as well as his employees. We want to be the home of choice for the family silver. In contrast, sellers who are simply seeking to squeeze the last dollar from a transaction by shopping their company to a dozen or so buyers are not for us. The sort of deal they are looking for is one we don't want. We have found that some owners are looking for a forever home for their business, not a temporary resting place. If they want to be paid in Berkshire stock, that's an encouraging sign. But even if they want all cash, as many of our sellers last year did, we like to know they feel comfortable with the people who will be in charge and that they expect the business to flourish under our ownership. Consequently, the deal was called off on Friday, December 8th. The following Monday, Charlie and I called Bob Felice, chairman of the trust, and made an all-cash offer with no financing contingencies. The next day, the trustees voted tentatively to accept our offer, and a week later, we signed a contract. JM is the nation's leading producer of commercial and industrial insulation and also has major positions in roofing systems and a variety of engineered products. The company's sales exceed $2 billion, and the business has earned good, if cyclical, returns. Jerry Henry, JM's CEO, had announced his retirement plans a year ago, but I'm happy to report that Charlie and I have convinced him to stick around. Two economic factors probably contributed to the rush of acquisition activity we experienced last year. First, many managers and owners foresaw near-term slowdowns in their businesses, and in fact, we purchased several companies whose earnings will almost certainly decline this year from peaks they reached in 1999 or 2000. The declines make no difference to us, given that we expect all of our businesses to now and then have ups and downs. Only in the sales presentations of investment banks do earnings move forever upward. We don't care about the bumps. What matters are the overall results. But the decisions of other people are sometimes affected by the near-term outlook, which can both spur sellers and temper the enthusiasm of purchasers who might otherwise compete with us. A second factor that helped us in 2000 was that the market for junk bonds dried up as the year progressed. In the 2 preceding years, junk bond purchasers had relaxed their standards, buying the obligations of ever weaker issuers at inappropriate prices. The effects of this laxity were felt last year in a ballooning of defaults. In this environment, financial buyers of businesses, those who wished to buy using only a sliver of equity, became unable to borrow all they thought they needed. What they could still borrow, moreover, came at a high price. Consequently, LBO operators became less aggressive in their bidding when businesses came up for sale last year. Because we analyzed purchases on an all-equity basis, our evaluations did not change, which means we became considerably more competitive. Aside from the economic factors that benefited us, we now enjoy a major and growing advantage in making acquisitions, in that we are often the buyer of choice for the seller. That fact, of course, doesn't assure a deal. Sellers have to like our price, and we have to like their business and management. But it does help. We find it meaningful when an owner cares about whom he sells to. We like to do business with someone who loves his company, not just the money that a sale will bring him, though we certainly understand why he likes that as well. When this emotional attachment exists, it signals that important qualities will likely be found within the business: honest accounting, pride of product, respect for customers, and a loyal group of associates having a strong sense of direction. The reverse is apt to be true also. When an owner auctions off his business, exhibiting a total lack of interest in what follows, you will frequently find that it has been dressed up for sale, particularly when the seller is a financial owner. And if owners behave with little regard for their business and its people, their conduct will often contaminate attitudes and practices throughout the company. When a business masterpiece has been created by a lifetime or several lifetimes of unstinting care and exceptional talent, it should be important to the owner what corporation is entrusted to carry on its history. Charlie and I believe Berkshire provides an almost unique home. We take our obligations to the people who created a business very seriously, and Berkshire's ownership structure ensures that we can fulfill our promises. When we tell John Justin that his business will remain headquartered in Fort Worth, or assure the Bridge family that its operation will not be merged with another jeweler, these sellers can take those promises to the bank. How much better it is for the painter of a business Rembrandt to personally select its permanent home than to have a trust officer or uninterested heirs auction it off. Throughout the years, we have had great experiences with those who recognize that truth and apply it to their business creations. We'll leave the auctions to others. The economics of property, casualty insurance. Our main business, though we have others of great importance, is insurance. To understand Berkshire, therefore, it is necessary that you understand how to evaluate an insurance company. The key determinants are: 1, the amount of float that the business generates; 2, its cost; And 3, most critical of all, the long-term outlook for both of these factors. To begin with, float is money we hold but don't own. In an insurance operation, float arises because premiums are received before losses are paid, an interval that sometimes extends over many years. During that time, the insurer invests the money. This pleasant activity typically carries with it a downside. The premiums that an insurer takes in usually do not cover the losses and expenses it eventually must pay. That leaves it running an underwriting loss, which is the cost of float. An insurance business has value if its cost of float over time is less than the cost the company would otherwise incur to obtain funds. But the business is a lemon if its cost of float is higher than market rates for money. A caution is appropriate here. Because loss costs must be estimated, insurers have enormous latitude in figuring their underwriting results, and that makes it very difficult for investors to calculate a company's true cost of float. Errors of estimation, usually innocent but sometimes not, can be huge. The consequences of these miscalculations flow directly into earnings. An experienced observer can usually detect large-scale errors in reserving, but the general public can typically do no more than accept what's presented. And at times I have been amazed by the numbers that big-name auditors have implicitly blessed. Both the income statements and balance sheets of insurers can be minefields. The economics of property casualty insurance. Our main business, though we have others of great importance, is insurance. To understand Berkshire, therefore, it is necessary that you understand how to evaluate an insurance company. The key determinants are 1, the amount of float that the business generates, 2, its cost, and 3, most critical of all, the long-term outlook for both of these factors. To begin with, float is money we hold but don't own. In an insurance operation, float arises because premiums are received before losses are paid, an interval that sometimes extends over many years. During that time, the insurer invests the money. This pleasant activity typically carries with it a downside. The premiums that an insurer takes in usually do not cover the losses and expenses it eventually must pay. That leaves it running an underwriting loss, which is the cost of float. An insurance business has value if its cost of float over time is less than the cost the company would otherwise incur to obtain funds. But the business is a lemon if its cost of float is higher than market rates for money. A caution is appropriate here. Because loss costs must be estimated, insurers have enormous latitude in figuring their underwriting results, and that makes it very difficult for investors to calculate a company's true cost of float. Errors of estimation, usually innocent but sometimes not, can be huge. The consequences of these miscalculations flow directly into earnings. An experienced observer can usually detect large-scale errors in reserving, but the general public can typically do no more than accept what's presented. And at times, I have been amazed by the numbers that big-name auditors have implicitly blessed. Both the income statements and balance sheets of insurers can be minefields. With respect to Berkshire's life insurance business, annuity reserves and policyholder liabilities are carried at the present value of the actuarially determined ultimate payment amounts, discounted at market interest rates existing at the inception of the contracts. Such interest rates range from 5% to 8%. periodic accretions of the discounted liabilities are charged against income from finance and financial products businesses. Investments in securities with fixed maturities held by Berkshire's life insurance business are classified as held to maturity. Investments classified as held to maturity are carried at amortized cost, reflecting the company's ability and intent to hold such investments to maturity. Such items consist predominantly of mortgage loans and collateralized mortgage obligations. Our smaller insurance operations produced an excellent underwriting profit in 2000 while generating significant float, just as they have done for more than a decade. If these companies were a single and separate operation, people would consider it an outstanding insurer. Because the companies instead reside in an enterprise as large as Berkshire, the world may not appreciate their accomplishments, but I sure do. Last year, I thanked Rod Eldred, John Kaiser, Don Towle, and Don Worcester, and I again do so. In addition, we now also owe thanks to Tom Nerney at U.S. Liability and Michael Stearns, the new head of Cyprus. You may notice that Brad Kinstler, who is CEO of Cyprus and whose praises I've sung in the past, is no longer in the list above. That's because we needed a new manager at Fetchheimer Brothers, our Cincinnati-based uniform company, and called on Brad. We seldom move Berkshire managers from one enterprise to another, but maybe we should try it more often. Brad is hitting home runs in his new job, just as he always did at Cyprus. Geico 1-800-847-7536 or Geico.com. Last year, I told you we would step up advertising at Geico in 2000 and that it would be our best investment. I was wrong. The extra spend did not produce a commensurate increase in inquiries. The conversion rate of inquiries into sales actually fell. These negative developments combined to produce a sharp increase in our per-policy acquisition cost. Agonizing over errors is a mistake, but acknowledging and analyzing them can be useful, though that practice is rare in corporate boardrooms. There, Charlie and I have almost never witnessed a candid post-mortem of a failed decision. There are at least 4 factors explaining Geico's higher acquisition cost in 2000. We pushed frequency very hard in certain media and overstepped diminishing returns. We may have harvested much of the low-hanging fruit. Younger generations now more open to direct purchase, but older ones still reluctant. We tightened underwriting standards and raised rates where frequency and severity climbed. Some prospects found us less attractive. Our largest competitor, State Farm, has been slow to raise prices despite sharply higher loss costs. State Farm's float cost may have been 23% in 2000, compared to 6.1% at Geico. State Farm remains one of America's greatest business stories. It grew from a 1922 mutual insuring Illinois farmers into a company whose tangible net worth by 1999 exceeded that of all but 4 U.S. corporations. Yet, Geico's lower operating cost model will, over time, drive our share growth and profitability, provided we avoid unprofitable pricing for too long. Tony Nicely, Geico's CEO, remains an owner's dream. Everything he does makes sense. He never distorts reality. As 2000 unfolded, Tony cut back on unprofitable advertising and pressed for price increases where necessary. He reviews loss reports daily and never lags. I told you of Geico's profit-sharing plan targeting 2 variables, growth in policies, and the loss experience of our seasoned business. Despite difficult headwinds in 2000, GEICO still earned an 8.8% profit-sharing payout totaling $40.7 million. GEICO will be a huge part of Berkshire's future. Its rock-bottom operating cost lets Americans purchase mandatory auto coverage at the cheapest price while still delivering top-ranked service. That combination inevitably produces growth and profitability. We will pound the theme of save money with GEICO until all drivers know our value. Investments. Below are our largest equity positions, all literal shares, not numbers. American Express Company, the Coca-Cola Company, the Gillette Company, the Washington Post Company, Wells Fargo and Company. Others, in 2000, we sold nearly all of our Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, established 15% stakes in several mid-sized firms, bought a few high-yield bonds, and added to our mortgage-backed securities. There are no bargains among our holdings today. We're content, but far from excited. Many assume that Berkshire's first option is marketable securities, but since 1983, we've said we'd rather buy entire businesses. One reason is personal. I love working with our subsidiary managers. They're talented, rational, and owner-oriented. But the real power driver is tax. Owning 80% or more of a business provides far better tax economics than a smaller stake in a stock. If a subsidiary we fully own earns $1 million after tax, we keep all $1 million. No dividend tax. If earnings are retained and we later sell the unit for $1 million more, there's no capital gains tax either. The tax cost of that sale includes all retained earnings. Contrast owning 10% of a public stock. Our $1 million slice of $10 million in earnings suffers additional taxes if paid or in a future capital gain. Effectively, the IRS is a partner twice over in a minority position, but only once when we own 80% or more. Put simply, the valuation formula is unchanged since 600 BC. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. To apply it, you need 3 answers. How many birds lie in the bush? When will they emerge? And what's the risk-free rate? Long-term U.S. bonds. Plug in conservative ranges rather than precise guesses. Work only where you have reasonable confidence in the birds in the bush estimates. And avoid businesses requiring constant capital infusions. We make many mistakes, but our approach filters out the most perilous gambles. Lately, negotiated deals for whole businesses have offered the most promising bushes, though returns will only be reasonable in normal markets. Truly juicy results come only when pessimism grips capital markets. We're at the opposite end of that cycle today. Sources of reported earnings. The shoe businesses were the sole disappointment in 2000. Dexter produced operating losses amid cutthroat import competition. I clearly erred paying what I did for Dexter in 1993 and compounded that by issuing Berkshire shares. Last year, we wrote off the remaining Dexter goodwill. Our managers there are first class, they deserve better economics, and we'll work to improve the results. Flight safety and executive jet. Flight safety, founded by Al Welchi, now 83, leads in aircraft and ship operator training. We invested $272 million in simulators in 2000 and will spend similar amounts in 2001. Anyone who thinks depreciation isn't a real cost should intern at a simulator builder. Executive Jet's fractional ownership NetJets grew recurring revenues 49% in 2000. Margins are slim, and investors in this sector are few. Growth will be constrained by aircraft availability, but we'll take delivery of over 50 jets in 2001. Safety is paramount. Our pilots train 23 days a year, fly 800 hours, and stick to one aircraft type. Our families and many directors regularly fly NetJets, so we insist on top standards. Our various businesses are detailed on pages 42 through 58. On pages 67 through 73, we resegment Berkshire on a non-GAAP basis to match Charlie's and my mental map of the company. Look-through earnings. Reported earnings omit retained earnings of major investees, yet these often benefit Berkshire far more than the dividends they'd pay. We calculate look-through earnings by 1. Operating earnings, excluding purchase adjustments, capital gains, and non-recurring items. 2. Our share of undistributed earnings of key investees. 3. Hypothetical tax on those undistributed earnings. In 2000, this yields look-through earnings of approximately $2.4 billion. While the figure is approximate and judgment-based, it's the closest proxy to Berkshire's true recurring earning power. Full and fair reporting. We aim to give you every fact we'd want as shareholders, financial details, operating context, and candid CEO commentary in our own words. No glossy photos, no EBITDA spin, no PR written prose. We publish annual and quarterly reports on the internet simultaneously for all 300,000 owners. No selective disclosures or guidance leaks. Quarterly postings will be Saturdays, May the 12th, August 11th, and November 10th. The 2001 annual report on March 9th. We applaud SEC Chairman Levitt's crackdown on selective disclosure. The era of winks and nods to favored analysts is over. If a public company hovers above the rest, it must share key information with every shareholder at once. One more soapbox: CEOs don't publicly promise X% long-term growth. Few big companies can sustain even a handful of such rates. Lofty forecasts often lead to desperate accounting gimmicks. We avoid that trap. Miscellaneous. We're pleased FASB replaced pooling with an approach that eliminates most goodwill amortization charges. When final, Berkshire's reported earnings will more closely match economic reality, though our intrinsic value is unchanged. I'm enclosing Charlie's transcript from Wesco's 2000 meeting. He's a master of business economics. Reading him will deepen your understanding of Berkshire. Charlie's Hall of Fame pick, Ralph Shea of Scott Fetzer, retired at age 76 after 15 years of splendid service, 15 times worth of the $230 million we paid. We thank Ralph for the billions of dollars he delivered. 20 years ago, I entered Ben Graham's Columbia class. 10 prior years of my own stock picking yielded average returns. A few months of Graham's teaching delivered returns in the high double digits. I owe him a lasting debt. Shareholder designated contributions. In 2000, 97% of eligible shares designated $18 per share, totaling $16.9 million to nearly 4,000 charities. Over 20 years, we've contributed $164 million per shareholder instructions. Subsidiaries added $18.3 million in 2000. For 2001, Class A shares must be registered in the owner's name by August 31st, 2001. Forms will mail September 15th, with a November 15th deadline. The annual meeting will meet Saturday, April 28th at the Civic Auditorium in Omaha. Doors 7 a.m. Movie 8:30 a.m. Meeting 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. We'll poll shareholders later on whether to return to Mondays once the new convention center opens. Proxy materials explain credentials, travel assistance via American Express, hotel shuttles, and buses to Nebraska Furniture Mart and Borsheim's. Bring credit card details to Geico's booth and see if you can save 8% on auto insurance. At Nebraska Furniture Mart, 72nd Street, 75-acre store. Show your badge April 25th to 30 for Berkshire weekend employee pricing, even on normally non-discounted lines. At Borsheim's, the largest U.S. jewelry store outside Manhattan, share-only events Friday evening and Sunday afternoon. Retail pricing applies Thursday through Monday. Outside the store, local bridge, chess, and backgammon masters will play Sunday. Reserve Gorat's Steakhouse for Sunday, April 29th. Call April 2nd. Or dine any evening. On Saturday night, the Omaha Golden Spikes play the New Orleans Zephyrs at Rosenblatt Stadium. I'll pitch Ernie Banks versus my new delivery. The Proxy explains game tickets and lots more. February 28, 2001. Warren E. Buffett, Chairman of the Board.